Hello, Culture Matters Podcast. We're back again with more culture content. Here's a quote before I introduce the topic. Those who vote decide nothing. Those who count the vote decide everything. Joseph Stalin. Oh, our topic today, which is why I picked this quote, how to delegate without seeming like a dictator. Without seeming like a dictator. There's interesting contradictions in this content topic. The one thing, how to delegate without seeming like a dictator. I use this quote, or I picked this quote. I thought it was very interesting. Stalin said, "Those who vote decide nothing. Those who count the vote decide everything." What is a vote? A vote is a representation of an individual's truth, an individual's word, an individual's thought. It's a reflection on a deep level of how an individual lives. How we vote reflects a part of our personality. It reflects our experience. It reflects us. It's a reflection of who we are. And the decision to vote in itself is an act of vulnerability. It's an act of courage. It's a it's the responsibility. It's the responsibility each individual has to their company, to their culture, to their country. If we're using the analogy of a company and the country, like your vote matters, your thoughts and your words and your actions matter in a company. And when they stop mattering, or when you think they stop mattering, then you stop mattering. The attachment between your identity and the company wanes. It becomes disintegrated or um, it softens. And that has an impact on individuals. That has an impact on people. People that work for companies they don't enjoy have there are consequences. There are consequences on the individual. There are symptoms to that. Same with countries. Not being proud of one's country. It is going to have a psychological impact on a person. The vote represents the person. It represents the word. It represents the thoughts. It represents the life. It is the what it's you have an opportunity to vote for your word to matter, for your word to mean something. And yes, it can be reduced to nothing, like, oh, my vote doesn't matter. It's just one. I'm in this state or that state, and what does it all mean in the end? There's an electoral college. When it's reduced to the ridiculous, it can be cast aside as something meaningless and doesn't mean anything. But it can mean, it does have meaning because it's an extension of the individuality of the individual. In a society where you vote and it is counted um, with integrity, without corruption, then if no one voted, then it wouldn't have any outcome. There would be no election. But if everyone does it, then the truth will be revealed. The collective, I guess, the best party wins, whatever that means, whatever that the season that culture is in. I guess where I'm going with this is for this content topic, right? How to delegate without seeming like a dictator. Well, a dictator may want to delegate. They just may want to delegate to fools or those in positions of incompetency, not even intentionally, but that would happen naturally as a byproduct of one in a position of authority, influence, and power who, going back to the quote, those who vote decide nothing. Okay. Those who count the vote decide everything. So, for example, you get 10 votes, you read the answers, but those who count the vote, oh, we're counting, but we're going to count wrong. We're going to count in our self-interest. Like, I think that's implicit in this quote. Those who count, their lies can outweigh the truth of the vote. So all the voters, they tell the truth as they see it. They all represent their individuality through what they think. Their word has relevance, has an impact on the culture. However, in a corrupt system, those who count the vote decide everything. They can lie. They can count wrong. They can change the outcome not based on what actually happened, but what they'd want people to perceive to happen. Those in positions of authority, we can all fall into this. The dictator uh, will not accept the truth. They will not accept the truth if it contradicts their truth. They will not accept it. It will be a team meeting where people can't even breathe. There's fear to say what one thinks. There's there's pacifying. There's gaslighting. And it can be top down, very, very aesthetically obvious or gruff, abrasive in your face. Like, we're going to do it my way. This is what's going to be done. But it could also be passive. It could be playing the victim. It could be taking things personally and creating guilt in others. They're tiptoeing around, sharing the facts and the figures that they've come up with. It can look like the dictator overemphasizing other people's failings that are not in that meeting. For if it's a team huddle, team meeting, and there are those that are not present that are becoming the pariah or the enemy, yet they're still within the confines of the culture. They're still a part of the company. They're being talked about negatively on their character, on their work, and they're not there from a person in a position of authority. If they're doing that, they're destroying that person. They're swaying, they're taking what's good about them and what's good about the relationship between them and those in their meeting, and they're taking that for granted. And that energy now of positive is going to be used to turn negative against another person, unwittingly. Happens all the time with those in positions of authority that are insecure, are unclear, are generally afraid of the unknown. You know, how to delegate without seeming like a dictator. Dictators delegate. Dictators, it's an over delegation. They're not taking responsibility for anything. The issue is that when everything is delegated, but the truth is not permitted to come into existence or come into fruition or bubble up to the top, then that creates incompetence. The most competent people will be destroyed, like I just articulated. Those not in the room will be talked down on and undermined. Um, as well as the most competent will leave. They will leave the country, they will leave the company, they will look for other employment if they're unable to speak. So there's this combination of delegation and the stultification of truth, the inability to speak one's mind and in the absence of speaking and articulating truth, voting, right? We vote every time we open our mouth and we say what we think. In the absence of voting, those who count the vote decide everything. Now that one person is thinking for everyone at all times, and those that are end up staying in that company or staying in that culture, staying in that country, become numbed, dubbed down, idiotic, foolish, stupid, even if they are not. They become that mind controlled. They become controlled by ideology, by a collective mind share, by an acceptance of dogma, by an acceptance of truths that can easily be questioned. The conscience slowly separates from them, and almost like an invisible film in the liar lid journey, I call it the honest liar succumbs to liar lid journey. The liar lid is what happens to the person in position of authority, influence, power that succumbs to their own self-deceits as a consequence of being in ultimate authority and succumbing to the fruit of that, the fruit with the snake in it. There's a worm in that apple. When you bite it, you're gonna have a worm go in your throat and turn into a parasite, and you become the host, and the parasite is running you. That's what happens when those in positions of authority, influence, power become corrupt by the power, right? Lord Abington, is it Lord Abington? Power corrupts absolute power. Power power corrupts absolute. Power corrupts absolutely. Lord Abington. Lord, who the hell said that? That's gonna bother me. Who said power corrupts? Lord Acton said, not Abington. Lord Jean Emmerich Edward Dahlberg Acton. Lord Acton said that. Abington. Good thing I looked that up. Stalin also said a single death is a tragedy. A million deaths is a statistic. To just so you understand where he was coming from as a dictator. It is not heroes that make history, but history that makes heroes. Death is the solution to all problems. No man, no problem. Yikes. I believe in only one thing, the power of human will. Interesting. So he believed in the power of human will, yet stifled it and stultified it so as to control it. And that was a reflection of his will. His So how do you actually delegate without seeming like a dictator? The interesting thing, the seeming part, seeming like a dictator, that is so it's as if the content was written by a dictator, like, or one in a position of control, over emphasis of psychological control, an unwillingness to let go, to um, trust, to believe, trust oneself, believe in others. How to delegate without seeming like a dictator. One is or is not a dictator or dictatorial. A part of that is hiring. Those that are weak will hire weak people, even if they don't recognize it. Those that are weak will hire weak people because unconsciously they will be afraid of strong people. There will be an inferiority. There will be So there's a paradox in that, because how do you actually, if you're weak and you think you're strong, how do you hire stronger people? That's where counsel comes in. That's where uh, coaching, like self-development, comes in. That often doesn't come in if it's a weak person, position of authority that thinks they're strong. It's not going to come in until they have become weak and they've fallen, and there's a degree of humility. That said, strong people, or those in a spirit of strength, a spirit of courageous upward aim, and that's where I think redemption is a thing. You know, we can change, we can decide to get better, we can pursue help, and in that pursuit is an act of openness and humility, um, or at least correlates to an act of openness and humility. There's exceptions to everything that would help one gain security. So, okay, what creates security? What creates confidence in a position of authority? Vision. This is where we're going. A plan. But now, this is the thing. How do you have a vision and a plan if you don't know what you're doing? That's where education comes in. That's where learning comes in. And the person at the top, the CEO, for example, has to constantly be learning, constantly be engaged in other environments outside the organization, constantly exploring unknown territory. It's part of the job because they're synthesizing the unknown and bringing it into the known. They're bringing relationships and resources and reasons into the known, into the current organization. They're leaving the walled palace, the walled garden, and they're going out into the wilderness, and they're bringing back information. They're bringing back other weapons, technologies. They're bringing back tribes. They're leaving with their legions. There's HQ, there's Rome, and then they're going on. Marcus Aurelius is going on a tour. They're going out and they're battling and and they're coming back with culture. They're coming back with wisdom and art and insights and learnings and technologies and educations and other ways to see the world and evolve the world. And implicit in that, how do you delegate without seeming like a dictator? A big part of that is implicit. How engaged is the leader? How involved and enmeshed in the company are they? What's their level of sacrifice? What's their level of competency? What's their level of vision? What's their level of education? What's what relationships do they have around them? What's their temperament? What's their personality? This goes back to the scorpion and the frog. Are there just bad people? I think there are people that even bad people would agree that they're bad. How do you delegate without seeming like a dictator? Well, you won't have to. If a person in a position of confidence and competence hires someone that understands the vision, is motivated based on their own vision, intertwined with the vision of the company, knows what they're doing, and they're given that opportunity, that clear description of employment, and that expectation is held through ritual, through um, uh, direct communication, um, and they believe in their organization. They believe in their leaders. They admire them. They learn things from them. They will they will get things done. It's the weak and insecure and lack of esteem leader that will be overbearing, that will be over the seagull manager swooping in, shitting all over and leaving. So, what is vision? Why does it matter? Vision is the aim. Vision is going to come as a consequence of putting in the work. What is our product? What is our service? How does it help customers? Why is it relevant? What does our competition look like? How can we beat them? What's the market share? Where could this thing go? And, how can we get there? The vision is going to come as a consequence of an engaged, talented, competent leader. It just will be there if they are the leader. It will be there. The stories will be told. The stories will come as a consequence of the excitement of a purpose, of a problem being solved. That will just naturally happen. Now, yes, as the vision is actualized and achieved, there is a new level, a new floor. There's a never-ending ladder. There's a never-ending stairway. How high up one climbs will be based on what they want. It will be based on who influences them. It will be based on their education. It will be based on their intellect. It will be based on their talent. Implicit, your people know if you are all in. That's important. The glue to delegating without being a dictator is to actually be all in and engaged to now the argument to that would be that dictators throughout history, there are many that have worked unbelievably countless hours. So then it goes, you know, were they capable of love? That's a different podcast, I guess. At what level does love play into the picture of you know that the thou shalts? What value are the thou shalt nots as it relates to a person who can get away with anything and lie and deceive at any impulse? The only one holding them accountable is the God that they worship. And if they don't worship any God, then they're the God they worship. I mean, even if you're listening to this and you don't believe in your God, whatever culture you come from, or you haven't adopted another culture's God, the God is an accountability mechanism to the person that can get away with everything and suffer no direct consequence to their awareness. They can lie and deceive and undermine and betray this biological impulse we have to trust other people as a consequence of desiring to survive and being a social group. If they don't have a God, they are God, and there's no accountability. So the question becomes, what's do they ever take responsibility without accountability? And no, maybe power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. They become entitled. There's is it resp the responsibility that comes with ultimate authority without accountability, it transmutes into entitlement. I am entitled to do as I please, when I please, with what I please. I am no longer playing the same game as other people, as the people. I am above and elevated beyond the people. Now, this is the thing. Someone in absolute authority, whether it's a CEO or a king or president or whatever, can get away with that for some time. And that would probably be fun for them for a while. However, as the story goes, they will eventually be ripped apart by the crowd because in the in the absence of force, in the absence of weapons, in the absence of fear of death, in the absence of power and control, they won't no one's going to want to play with them for long. They're not going to want to play their game. And there will be enough people that live in truth that will speak up against the company, speak up against the leadership, speak up against the country, speak up against the society. Many will die, or and in that, if it's a company context, be fired or quit. If it's a country, put in prison, even if they're innocent, or killed, even if they're innocent. They're just speaking out against corruption. They're just speaking out against tyranny. They're just speaking out against their vote being changed. How to delegate without seeming like a dictator. A leader, a person in a position capable of leading and serving, and where their people choose to follow, again and again and again. At any moment, a leader can fall into a tyrannical behavior, a tyrannical moment, a tyrannical sense. And even the world's constant flux of change creates context where there will be executive orders, there will be executive decisions, there will be an unclear answer of what the right thing is to do. And the person in ultimate authority has to make a decision. And that could come with a cost, that comes with costs that ages them and changes them. And, in a sense, they benefit from having walls to protect their throne, because it's dangerous to be at the top and make the tough decisions. But how do you delegate without seeming like a dictator? Is you don't act like one. You know what you're doing. You constantly improve. You surround yourself with those that are capable of saying no, that will tell you the truth. You don't stop paying attention like Osiris in the Egyptian myth we've gone into. If go listen to Rule 4 of Beyond Order. It'll be out in a few weeks if it's not live. Osiris stopped paying attention and was killed by his evil brother Seth. You have to be engaged. You have to pay attention. You have to hire those who are intelligent, knowledgeable, and integrated, that are not there for the political opportunity to take your spot, like Stalin once did with Lenin and those in the line of succession. And you have to gather. It takes ritual. It takes celebration. It takes recognition of people's wins and the absence of stealing their wins and taking the credit yourself as a person in authority to actually continually incentivize growth of the people, incentivize honesty, incentivize competence, incentivize engagement and buy-in to continually innovate and rebuild the culture as the market changes and the products become less effective relative to competition and the services have to evolve in the face of technological change and cultural transformation. How to not delegate without seeming like a dictator is don't be an asshole. Share this with a friend that needs to hear it. Leave us a review on the Culture Matters podcast, and we will see you next time.